what's the point of it? What we can do is consider reincarnation to be a thought experiment. Along the same lines, for example, as the simulation theory of the universe. There's a philosopher by the name of Bostrom who put this forward originally. The idea is that just as we have environments on the internet where you can go in and play games with thousands of other people in a simulated world, the idea is that everything we're experiencing now is a simulation run on some high-powered computer software by another species. No way of proving it, but it's a fascinating and, more importantly, it can be a useful thought experiment. So the beauty of philosophy is that we don't need to be ideologically committed to anything. We don't need to be committed to the principles to draw the benefit from them. So as a thought experiment, if reincarnation was absolutely true, what would it mean for your present? What would change about your present? So what we're saying with the theory of reincarnation is that your past predicts your future. And we know this in general, that we are creating our environments and we are creating our embodiments. We see that on a day-to-day basis. We see that throughout our lives. If I'm in the casino, that's my environment. I'm creating that environment through my desires and my choices. Is my body fit, healthy? Is it mediocre, or is it deeply unhealthy? Where has that come from? Look at my lifestyle. Look at the things I do and don't do, the desires that propel me. We are creating our experiences. So it's a dice roll, it seems to us, when we think about the next birth. What sort of temperament will I have? Will I be a sports person, scientist, or an entertainer? What kind of environment am I born into? Capitalist, communist, male or female, gender, sexuality? What will I be like? It seems like it's a roll of the dice. It's not a roll of the dice. It's unpredictable. There's no way of foreseeing it, but our past is predicting our future. And so what environment is next for me? I don't know. Today I am predator, tomorrow I am the prey. We don't know what lies in store for us, but what we can know is the quality and the nature of the desires that I am entertaining. What desires am I creating? And it's important that we understand this. We create our desires. And in part, that is done passively, if you like. When we desire something, we don't feel that we have consciously tried to desire it. It's happening to us. Nonetheless, we're creating it in the same way that we're creating the hair that grows from our head. We're not consciously doing it, but we're doing it. But more importantly is that we have the capacity to scrutinize our desires and manage them. So in that sense, I am responsible for the desires that I'm creating. Once I've understood what kind of desires I'm creating, what would be a conducive environment for them? Where would they get a natural expression? What environment am I propelling myself towards with the kind of desires that I am entertaining? What sort of world am I creating for myself, for others, for future generations? If reincarnation was true, what would I change? So this is an interesting experiment. Ask somebody, do you believe in reincarnation? And depending upon the circles that you move in, you'll get, oh yes, yes of course. Interesting follow-up question is, what are you doing about it? How does it change your life? What sort of behaviours, what sort of attitudes does your belief in reincarnation create for you? If we don't express something as a behaviour, then we don't believe it. We can say we believe it because we have to, because we're part of a group that believes it, because we've grown up in a religion that talks about it. But beliefs express as behaviour. If you don't believe it, you won't express it. There's a beautiful quote by a US politician from a number of years ago, and he says, "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value." So when a politician gets up, they spout all of the rhetoric we value this principle and that principle, we're going to work for the people, we're going to support this, that. But when their budget comes out, the money goes off to other interests. So if you're not spending your money in those areas, then you don't truly value it. Where are you spending your time, your attention, your behavior? That shows what you value. If you woke up and you had with absolute certainty the conviction reincarnation is true, you would be desperate to start sharing and giving, to forgive all of the people around you who had harmed you, to accept people for who and what they are, to create a better world, instead of having petty attitudes of taking, trying to win arguments, hating people, blaming others. If we actually believed, I'm coming back here, and I don't know, maybe I'll be born into a poor environment, maybe I'll be born into a world that is war-torn, maybe one that has higher levels of pollution. What kind of world am I creating? What kind of environment am I creating with my actions? If I know I've got to come back and live in those, perhaps in a different embodiment, I better start changing things. So if we do this thought experiment, we start to get an idea of the sort of desires that we're entertaining and which ones align to our conscience and which ones don't. But the question is, if when we do this thought experiment we know the right thoughts, feelings and actions that we should be expressing, then what stops us? What stops us from doing what we know to be right? It's fundamentally ego. There's a few different aspects of the ego in the way that it expresses. First is false assumptions and beliefs. We hold things to be true that are not true. We've picked up messages, we've arrived at conclusions from our experiences throughout our life that aren't true. Combining with those false assumptions, we have ego-centered interests. Things that we desire that spring from the ego and that serve the ego. It's all about me. We don't think about the effect on others. We only concern with whether or not my desire is being satisfied. And we express mechanical thought patterns and behaviors. We think a certain thing, we know it to be true, we keep thinking it, we don't question it. And the behavior just mechanically follows from that. So that's what stops us from doing what we know to be right. Doing what you know to be right requires effort. Instead of effort, we are passively being driven by ego-centered interests that are based on false assumptions about who we are, how the world works, and what life is all about. So how do we combat these? That's exactly the realm of spiritual practice or sadhana.